Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, and this week I am speaking with Vecepia Robinson. Hello, iconic. Now, I love to start each episode talking about something I was happy to see this week. And maybe I am cheating a bit, but I am really happy to see this interview. And not only this interview, but I'm happy to see all of the opportunities I've gotten to connect with people I grew up watching on TV thanks to this podcast. Vecepia is one of the few iconic Survivor winners I've been able to interview on my show. Previously, I've interviewed Todd Herzog on episode 13, and many folks know Todd was my all-time favorite Survivor player growing up. And I got to interview Earl Cole on episode 40, and I even got to meet Earl in person a few weeks ago when he was in Toronto, and it was so incredible to meet someone who I admired growing up. And even now, getting to speak with Vecepia, who is another quote-unquote under-the-radar woman of color winner, and being able to get her wisdom and compare notes with her, it's been the coolest thing ever. And when I started this podcast, I really wanted to tell stories that I thought were interesting and important and were inspiring. And I didn't realize that it would be a vehicle for me to meet so many people who I grew up admiring. So I am still always on cloud nine when I get to meet these iconic winners. And I have also had my share of don't meet your hero moments, not necessarily saying in the context of Survivor, but having those don't meet your hero moments where you meet someone and they are not as expected. I will say, with the winners I have spoken to, they have always been, wow, your heroes are way more awesome than you expected moments. So I am happy to see what I've been able to do as a result of the podcast. And I want to say thank you so much to everybody for listening, for making it possible for me to have these conversations with folks I admire. And it's my pleasure to bring them to you and to share their wisdom with you every week. And this week's episode is going to be a good one. Vecepia Robinson, aka the winner of Survivor Season 4, Survivor Marquesas. Vecepia is a reality TV icon. She was the first Black Survivor winner, the first Black Survivor finalist, and she was the first African American to win a reality show. Yet in spite of her being this icon, she has never been invited back to play the game. So in this episode, we talk about what it was like to feel overlooked by this franchise and to continue to do interviews about essentially being left out 10, 20 years after she was on the show. We also talk about the efforts of the Black Survivor Alliance to advocate for more representation and how Vecepia feels about the show now, and whether or not she is still a fan. So I got so much out of this conversation. It was very therapeutic to talk to somebody who had a similar experience even years ago and to see how incredible she is now. So without further ado, here is my interview with Vecepia Robinson. I hope you enjoy it. We had been chatting before this, so I hope everybody knows I've been fangirling. I cannot believe that we get to chat. Does it get weird when people tell you that they grew up watching you on TV? Like, do you feel like that ages you?
So number one, I have to thank you because I'm totally fangirling off of you. I just thought that you played an incredible game out there. So kudos and hats off to you. So to your question, I just think it's really incredible that people still, after 23 plus years, still, number one, recognize me, recognize my voice. That's the main thing. They're like, wait, you sound like, they go, oh my God, Vecepia, and because my name is so distinct, it's like I'm still out there. And I guess it'd be different if my name was Mary or Jane. They may kind of like pass it away, but Vecepia, there's not too many of us out there. So I think it brings a level of excitement, a level of refreshment to me, because when you think you're down and out and then people still remember you, especially when there are people that I know was not born when I was on the show, and they'll say, my mom told me about you and I watched you and oh my God, you were so great. And I'm just like, dude, you weren't even in the womb when I, was on, but it makes me feel good.
That must be so trippy. What was the youngest age of a person who's come up and recognized you?
15.
Wow.
And completely
Wow.
not even in their mother and father's thoughts at that time. But because their parents were huge fans of Survivor, they wanted them to grow up learning the show because the kid, when they started watching it, became a fan and wanted to one day, follow in the footsteps of many of us who have been out there. And so for them to be like, Vecepia, I watched your season about a year ago. So I'm like, okay, then you were like 12 or 13 then at that time, right? So it's been pretty cool.
Is it weird when this 15-year-old comes up to you and they say they just watched your season and you're like, oh, that is a version of me from a long time ago? Is there something weird about this younger version of you being the immortalized version that millions watch still?
I'm still the same person. I really have not changed my stripes. I mean, obviously there's certain things that have changed inside me, but the thrill of the game is always there. I love the game. So if anyone ever wants to talk about the game of Survivor, it's still very much a part of my life. I mean, right there, my torch is sitting right there in the corner of our bedroom. So, and I got that not through Survivor. I got it through someone who, when I got pregnant with my son, I did a baby story on TLC, the Learning Channel. And I talked about that they didn't give me my torch, and so I made like a little shadow box with a little torch in it. And the guy that actually was watching my show, that TLC episode, reached out to CBS and said, I want to give Vecepia her torch. I just saw it. And I auctioned and bid and won her torch. And now I'd like to give it to her. So CBS contacted me. The guy lived in I think it was Orange County. And I paid like $20 for it to be mailed to me. And I got it. So knowing that someone really, number one, appreciated me, didn't want any big amount of money for it. Whereas some of my tribe members, they had to pay big money to get their torches from people. This guy, I did not. So yeah, to answer your question, it really feels good to feel that, I'm on this pedestal, and not just as an African-American woman, but also as a woman who has been snubbed on really all of the seasons that they have done any type of winners or all-stars or anything, have been snubbed, not even given a phone call to say, hey, Vecepia, we're doing this. What's your interest? Now, I did get a phone call on the very first one, just like, we're checking to see who would like to go. Would you be interested? And I was like, well, hells yeah, of course. But that was the first and last time I ever heard from anyone.
I can relate to so much of this. I know that so much of the conversation around my season was about the edit and whether or not I was shown enough and whether or not the edit helped people to believe I was worthy or not of a winner. And I believe that you had a similar experience. So we have a lot that we can cover that we have in common. So first, let's start from the beginning. Right after your season aired, what was the initial reception of your win?
It was incredible. I mean, because several things were happening during that time. So my husband at the time, my son's father, and I, we decided to elope and get married, but we didn't tell the family members. We just kept it hush hush. But we did tell the people on Survivor. So some people thought that I still lived in Portland, Oregon, because my information said, from Portland, Oregon. But I had just moved to California. So the Portland people were like, well, where is she? We don't know where she is. And the California people were like, well, she said she's from Oregon. We're not going to give her no credit to be from California. So it was one of these two-edged swords. But because we didn't tell anyone except for Survivor that I was married, it was really awkward for a lot of people as they were watching the show. And I'm talking about, my husband on the scene. And they're like, why did you say you're married? And little did they know we were married. So when I got home, it was a huge reception here when they found out that, yes, the Survivor winner does live in Portland or does live in California. She lives in the city of Hayward. They tracked me down to the point where we were still in LA, or we were still in New York. And my neighbor said, we are getting all of these cars with, all the news were out with lights and stuff. They're like, all of these newscasters and stuff is in front of the house. And I was just like, oh, they just found out that I live in Hayward. And then they found out well, my mom lives in Portland, and they were all in front of my mom's house, taking all of these pictures and interviewing my brothers. And even my neighbor got interviewed. And I had promised her that if I got onto David Letterman, that I would give her a shout out. And I did. And so she was getting all these interviews about being shouted out on David Letterman. But it was fascinating, to come home, and for probably 6 months, I was doing some form of interview on a daily basis. And this was just a lot of the local stuff. I also started doing, when they started doing like the auditions and stuff for the next Survivor, I was always asked to come and do a little cameo for those. I had 2 shows that I was doing in the local area. So there were really great opportunities. And all of these were paying opportunities. But then it eventually, like anything, it eventually died down. I did do a lot of churches. A lot of churches from all the way on the East Coast were calling me, and they were flying me out to share my testimony. Being a Christian woman, playing a gut-wrenching, backstabbing, lying type of game, how did I balance, my moral being to the game? But I had a come to Jesus moment, as I like to say, when I was out there, and it was on day 3, where I was really frustrated with the way the game was being played. I was really battling with my my spiritual morals, lying, but then trying to stay true to my faith, and trying to encourage the teams. Let's get together and pray. And some of them wanted to, and some didn't. And so I went out into the woods and just took a walk. And I kept walking deeper and deeper in the woods. And as I kept walking in there, I really had a moment with Jesus, and this light shined down on me. And I was just like, I'm ready to go. I don't want to play this game. As much of a competitor as I am, I was like, I just can't do this. I'm battling too much with my morals in this situation. And the Lord spoke to me, and he said, I didn't bring you out here to play a religious game. I brought you out here to play the game of Survivor. And he said to me, what are the rules of Survivor? And I said, to outwit, outplay, and outlast. He says, you're not doing that. You're not trying to do that. And he said, if you do that, they're going to honor you. He says, they may criticize you, but they're going to give you that win. And he said, so you need to go and play their game, not play how you feel a Christian woman should be playing. So after that, I turned around and I realized I was lost. I didn't know where to go or how to get back. And within like 2 minutes, a helicopter was hovering over my head and directed me out back to the camp. And from that moment on, I played a cutthroat game. I flip-flopped. They called me the pancake because I was flipping left and right from one alliance to the next alliance to the next. And, from then on, I knew regardless, God had my back. And I was just going to play. And it was represented in like the last tribal council, the jury, how they were saying that I was a hypocrite. But in the end, they gave me their vote.
I could see how that's an interesting story, right? There's the perceived conflict of Survivor being a game of deceit, and then you being a woman of faith. But also, it's possible to do this game where you're eliminating people without compromising your morals or anything. And that's certainly what you did out there.
Yeah. And, more credit to those who could really stay within their beliefs and play their game and do very well at it. I wanted to play the game within the context of how the game was created, but I truly was battling. And I'm getting that almost like approval to be cutthroat and do that. Although, I'm not a nasty cutthroat person, but I'm an observer. I'm an observer of the game. And I really watched a lot. I kept a lot to myself. And I think that's why I did not get a whole lot of airtime, because when I would go out for my confessional, it would be maybe 20 minutes tops. But Boston Rob and Sean and Kathy and all those guys, they were out there for 2 hours, right? And it was because when they would ask me questions, I would sit back and I'd be like, are you going to take what I'm saying to you and twist it in a way that you can get something out of someone? And I was clammed up. I
Mhm.
chose to be clammed up. And some people say that was a detriment to my game because we really didn't see or hear you kind of like doing those very strategic things. But it didn't matter to me at the time. That was part of my strategy.
I think what people realize now once you've been on reality TV, and I think it was probably the same way when you were playing, is there are multiple games happening. There's the game of the actual game with the actual people who are there on the island with you. And then there's the game of reality TV. And those are two very different games. So even though you won the game with the people, you didn't care about the game of reality TV.
Exactly. And then there's a third component to this game. And that third component is you battling your own mind and your own beliefs and how you want to play the game. And I always told people that the game is, I would say, 80% strategy, maybe not even that much. I'd say 60% strategy, 40% luck, because there are things that you do in the game that you're like, I have no idea if this is going to work, but I'm going to toss the dice up in the air and see if this will work in my favor or will it just work in somebody else's favor. And in many instances, I did that, not knowing, how ultimately going to turn out.
Right after you won, at that time, Survivor's still huge. You're the fourth winner. And then we start to have more seasons and more winners. And then eventually we reached the point where your name comes up again, I would say around heroes versus villains. And the reason it came up was because you hadn't been invited to return for this Hallmark season. So at this point, you hadn't been called at all except for that one check-in call for All Stars, right?
That's correct.
And were you expecting for people to be asking you about why you hadn't been invited back or anything at this point?
Oh, absolutely. I literally expected to hear people reaching out to me. And not only were they reaching out to me via telephone, family members, friends from all over were contacting me, were texting me, but then on Facebook. I mean, it started to blow up.
Mhm.
And Instagram started to blow up. Like, Vecepia, I just don't understand why aren't you out there? Did you choose not to? Or even reading the feeds of people saying, well, maybe she's pregnant again, or maybe she was one that decided that she did
Mhm.
not want to do it anymore, and that and hearing people say, well, what does she have to lose? She's already won, so maybe she's the type that just said, what's the point of going out there? I don't have nothing else to prove to anyone else. So yeah, I'm choosing not to. And when people ask me the direct question, then I gave them my direct answer. But if people were just kind of
Mhm.
like chomping at the bit and having their own conversations, I just kind of read through them and listened and didn't really put my input in unless someone kind of reached out to me. And then later I would read it on the feed. They were like, I am Vecepia and she point blank told me this and that. So that was
Mhm.
nice. But yeah, I totally expected to hear from people.
And then years after that, I think that this conversation again reached new heights when it came to Winners at War and still not getting the call. And I saw that at that time you were out there doing interviews. You had talked about how you hadn't gotten the call back. One, did you expect that that was something you would be talking about 20 years later? Like when you went out to Marquesas, did you think you would be talking about this 20 years later? And then also, how did it feel to be doing all of these interviews to talk about essentially being left out from the franchise?
So when I went on Survivor, number one, I'm a thrill for competition. So this game was right up my alley. I'm still a lover of it, despite how things have been. And playing that game, my intention, it wasn't to seek the adventure. It wasn't to see if I could be this big strategist. My goal was to win $1 million.
Mhm.
I mean, I came in straight. That was it. And the thrill and the love of the game. And so from that, it was really disappointing. not to have been called back. So for a long time, I chose to keep my thoughts and my feelings about everything to myself. When Winners at War came out, and, of course, inside of me, I was like thrilled because I'm like, of course I'm going to get a call, if anything, a call to see what I'm doing. And then it's my choice to say yay or nay. It really hurt. And I shared that in the meetings that the Black Survivor Alliance was able to have with CBS. And I was able to share my truth about how I felt and the way things went, and even ask point blank to Jeff Probst, because he was in those meetings also, why was I not selected? I mean, it was a straight answer. And there were at least maybe 15 people on that call.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said it was an oversight. Now, come on. Seriously? At that time, still to this day, the only Black American female to win Survivor. I mean, Marianne is a Black Canadian, but still the only Black American female to win Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And you say it's an oversight.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself was extremely frustrating, but I was at peace. I really came to my point in life to kind of lay it all down and be like, okay, I've done what I felt that I needed to do. I was able to share my truth to the appropriate people, and life as I know it is now at peace. And I was pretty much done. And that's why I chose not to no longer do a whole lot of interviews or go to these different fundraising events anymore, because that was my culmination. And having the opportunity to not only speak to CBS and request certain things that we would like to see changed for the betterment of not just the show, but for the betterment of society as a whole, so that Survivor could truly look like our society. And to start seeing those over the last couple of years really has made me feel that all the effort that we did on those 2 years during COVID was worth it. And I do feel that it was worth our time.
I'm sorry that you got that initial response when you asked that question. I could only imagine what it's like being on the receiving end of hearing it was an oversight. Like, what do you mean? At that point, the list is like 37, 38 people that you can choose from. How do you not see my name? That's not a big list. So I'm sorry that was the response that you got. How did you find peace after that? What did you tell yourself for you to move on from that?
Yeah. So my faith is so strong. And even going out there, although my mindset was like, Lord, you are directing my steps in this situation. And he directs my steps in all things. And coming into a situation with the mentality of, I'm going to do my best. And even if it doesn't work out, you have my back. So did I come into going onto Survivor with the expectation that I'm going to have this new life afterwards? I'm going to be this new reality star, and all of these doors are going to be opening and all of that? Absolutely not. My expectation was I was going back to work and I was going to be raising the son that me and my husband at the time knew that we were going to have, and just enjoy life. And the perks started coming, and the perks were nice, but I chose not to let those perks change my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things started coming up for others, but not for me, I chose to kind of distance myself from that, because it didn't matter to me, and the people would go, did you hear that so-and-so got this? I'm like, good for them. I did not come in with that mentality, with that thought process that all these things are going to happen. So no, it wasn't a big issue to me. I mean, even to this day, I have some people, Sean, who was on my season, who is my son's godfather, and he's like my little brother. I love him to death. Every now and then we'll be talking, he'll go, yes, we're still chomping at the bit that you didn't, you wasn't on that. And I just said, Sean, there's nothing I can do about that anymore. We just got to go on with life. And that's it. And that's how I dealt with it.
There is something about that applies beyond just Survivor. I mean, we're two Survivor winners talking about our experience on the show, but then really I think it comes down to something that can apply to any situation where someone is feeling comparison or feeling like someone else has deemed them unworthy for something. You have to just release that control and know that what other people say doesn't define you.
It does not. And see, I never look at, yeah, words have power, but it's up to you to decide how much power you give those words. So, hearing words like undeserving, unworthy, under the radar, all of those different things, they didn't define who I was. I know how I played the game. And I also know that I signed that dotted line saying that you can use my image, my voice, my likeness any way you want to. So yeah, when I'm sitting at home watching Survivor every night, my season, and I'm seeing how things were flipped, and I'm seeing how they took something I said 1 minute and use it in another area. Part of me, because no one else knows, right? But I knew it, and the people that were on my tribe, they knew it. But I'd sit back and I would laugh because I was like, this is entertainment. They're going to do whatever they need to do to entertain. And Erika, I don't know if you did this, but when I was on, the internet was blowing up about our strategies and how we played the game. There were so many different little groups that had their own little Survivor, spiel, and would give like this full analysis of the game. And I truly believe that CBS had a crew that was probably dedicated to reading all of that feed. And in the process of reading all that feed, they would go back and edit film and probably make changes really quick based on how people are speaking to someone, and they probably were not saying a whole lot about me. So they were like, oh, let's remove that. Let's remove that. Oh man, that's a really good one about Sarah. Let's put that in, and just started to re-edit a whole episode based on what they are reading. And like I said, I didn't give them a whole lot. So that's why I didn't feel too bad that I wasn't shown a whole lot because I knew how I was playing. But I also knew that I probably was not the number one, that they expected to win, which I knew that they expected Kathy to win. But then number two, well, shit, she won this game. So now we've got to at least show her doing something, or it's going to be a discredit to the producers and the people that are editing. They didn't do a dang good job of doing it. So I think in the end, they had to at least make it look like I was a worthy winner, if not one that they would ever want to bring back.
I can totally relate. Not only did your competitors underestimate you, but production might have underestimated you too. And hey, if the story wasn't told to do you justice, ultimately, that's on them. That's not on you because you did what you needed to do to win.
So very true.
When I played, I think the internet definitely was in a different place where now there were more established Survivor communities online, established places for people to talk about. When I was a fan, I loved to consume all of this stuff. But then once I started playing, I stopped looking at what people had to say. I know that there are some people who love me, some people who think I'm not worthy. Thank you for talking about me either way. Glad that I was a thought enough for you to go and type it out on your computers. But then I stopped looking at it and then I realized, oh, even though these people are so passionate about the game, they're talking about me as if I'm this fictional character, not the me that's talking to you right now. And the reason they're talking about me and everybody else online is because this is an interest they have. And talking about it online is like their way of finding community and finding connection. So I don't take offense to what people say when they talk about the strategy. I can respect that this is your way of connecting with your community. At the same time, your connection with your community has nothing to do with me in real life. So like you go off and you talk about me and all the other players and the other winners, and I'm just going to pay it no mind. And I hope like you all have fun. But you have to learn to build these walls and to separate yourself from everything that everybody is saying. Do you find you still get pulled into the Survivor conversation even today?
Actually, I do not. And I think a lot of it is because many people that I am surrounded by have really now just watched the seasons of Survivor on a whim. They're not the committed, dedicated ones like they used to be. They're not having the big survivor parties like they used to be. So when they see me, they'll just ask me things like, so what are you doing now? Or how are you doing? Or are you watching the current season? And I'll say yes. They'll even ask me who is my favorite. But many of them are not necessarily that involved in it anymore. Younger people, surprisingly enough, are slowly starting to get involved with it. And they may ask me, what do they need to do to get on the show? And I come back and go, come on, darling, that was 24 years ago. You weren't even born. My advice may not even help you anymore because there's a whole different group of people that are doing the auditions, a whole set of people that are looking at footage. So it is very different than what it was when I went out.
Speaking of changes for the better, I want to go back to your work with the Black Survivor Alliance. That was something that was incredible to watch during the pandemic before I even went off to film the show. You made a strong push to advocate for more representation and for change on the show. So when you were in that process, one, was that healing for the younger Vecepia that played the game? And now with where the show is at, are you satisfied with the progress that's been made?
Yeah, that time during COVID and the Black Survivor Alliance was just a culmination of years of hurt, of years of pain, years of frustration, and many years of why. Because sometimes you think that you're in a boat alone, and at that time outside of Earl winning, I did seem like I was in a boat alone. But having number one, the space, before we even got to the point of wanting to advocate for the way things are now, giving us all permission to speak our truth of what went on out there. And I'm telling you, my mouth was dropped hearing everyone's stories and then realizing that, well, crap, I'm not in this boat alone. There were many others that were marginalized, that things were said to them that was said like, willy-nilly as if, oh, a Black person, don't make a big deal out of it. But no, and if the tables were turned and we ended up saying stuff like that, oh, it would be a big issue. So having that space, number one, it wasn't healing for the young Vecepia, but it certainly was healing for the seasoned Vecepia. Like I said, each time that there is a new survivor coming out, the questions are being asked, especially during the reunions, and they start talking about the new survivor. And if they happen to say, we're bringing people back, I'm immediately getting those phone calls. And the first thing in my mind is, okay, here we go. Like, well, where is it going to start? And then the phone would start ringing. The texts would start coming. Are you going to be the one? Are you going to be the one? And I always say, guys, I don't know. Or, I didn't get a call. So yes, it was extremely healing, more so for the older me, because the younger me was really out there to win the money and the competitive nature of the game.
Yeah. And with time, you realize that you were part of something bigger, right? Seeing you win and seeing the way that your story was told means something so much more to so many more people. So how do you feel about where the show is at now after you were able to give all that feedback?
We are on the outside looking in. So we are only seeing what's happening on the surface. When we met with the CBS executives, we had some very specific, I don't like to say demands, but some reflective revelations that we were hoping that they would take to heart and bring forth. And from the outside, without a doubt, we are seeing that. I mean, every time I see a season, and I hope people don't take this the negative way, but before it would be maybe one or two African Americans on there. And then the rest would be Caucasian, maybe an Asian, maybe a Latino. But now it's flipped. And to see so many BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color on there, it's not just Black folks. It is some of everyone, and maybe one or two, Caucasians. And it's just beautiful because that is America. and you get to see the dynamics of everyone's lives. So I'm like a baby, a mommy who has given birth multiple times, every time a season comes out, I'm sitting there, in labor going, and then when we see who's out there, I'm like, it's so thankful that that alone is being done. Now, we did have some other reflective recommendations that are more on the back end of it. And I think, Erika, you shared a little bit about, some of the producers or some of the people that may have been out there that were of indigenous race while you were there. So in that sense, because we don't hear about those, I don't know. I don't know who's on the back end. And we did, ask for, that there was a psychiatrist that is of the BIPOC community, that when these people of color come on, they have somebody that they can talk to and relate to. When you're going through the audition process, do I see somebody that looks like me in this process? Is there opportunities that people that used to be on the show before to come back and maybe give some advice and talk, whether it's talking to the group that has been selected or the last 32 that they're looking at, just to narrow it down to that final 16. We did request things like that. And from my knowledge, that part didn't happen. And I don't know to what degree in the back end those things happen. But I know from the surface, I am proud and I'm completely satisfied.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. I mean, nothing is perfect. People who listen to this podcast know I have thought critically about the show and I've podcasted about it and I've written about it. So, of course, nothing is perfect. There has been progress. There's definitely more progress left to be made. I will say something that no one can deny is when you look at the winners who have come after the casting mandate where it needed to become 50% BIPOC and you see the people who have been able to win after that was implemented, it does make a difference. So thank you so much for advocating for my cast and for all of the casts that came after and all the casts that are still to come.
This will still continue because Survivor is like legacy now. It's been around for so long. And just the opportunities of seeing people who were not even born when I went out there are now playing the game is phenomenal. And it shows the strength of the show. And, some people think that they need to bring in a new host. And, personally, I don't think so. I mean, to be honest, I don't particularly care for Jeff Probst, but I think that he does bring a certain something to the game because he's been there from the beginning. I even thought maybe they should bring in another female, and split it, having two hosts. But I think that he brings something special to the game. And I just think, it may lose something if he's not there.
Also, I hope people understand the reason that people like us think critically about the show and are willing to, make suggestions or talk about our experience in a way that makes people think critically is because we know the show is important and we care about it. We know it's important who people see on TV, the way that we see them talking to other people, the way that we see other people talk about them. And it's not just trying to, lick our wounds or to build up our ego, but it makes a difference when people see different people getting the opportunity to win. Any criticism of the show is really to make it something better for the show and for the people who are watching it.
Yeah. I always tell people, think about your own life. And if there are things that you really feel can be enhanced or done better, then I hope that you will take the initiative and really push for those efforts. You're always going to have those people that are not going to support you or will think differently. And that's okay. If you feel that what you are doing can bring forth a positive outlook into something, then, stand behind you. I mean, there were people that criticized what we did. Yeah, of course, but it didn't matter to us because I think that just the longevity of the show and allowing people of other races to feel now I have a chance when I applied for this show than I did before makes a huge difference, because I talked to a lot of people that said, why am I going to apply for Survivor? You know, I ain't going to make it. And I was just like, no, it's changed. And I think you should. And there's been one person, and I'm not going to give the name, who I had talked to, and they made the show. And I was like, yeah.
I had an amazing moment. I won't say who it is, but somebody messaged me the night that I won with a really sweet message saying that it was so inspirational to see me win. And then years later, they popped up on the show. I'm like, this is wild. So the thing is, it does make a difference, right? Vecepia, you being on the show, you giving that person that
Yes.
advice or whatever you said to them led to a tangible change where they ended up on the show.
Yep.
So we talk about this stuff because we do want to make a difference and to have other people get the opportunity to.
Yeah, Erika, I see us as trailblazers, me for many African American women. And even when I watch the show, every time another strong African American woman is on the show, I am so proud, that I was not the first, Ramona was the first, and I will every day give Ramona mad credit for being the first. And not to mention, she's one of my sorority sisters. So even more proud of that. But knowing that she blazed a trail for me, I'm now blazing a trail for people like Tiffany. Tiffany, that's on the season right now. I am rooting for her because I just love the way that she is playing this game. And for you too, you are blazing a trail for so many Filipino descent people and Asian descent people. So I hope that every time you see another Asian American, Asian Canadian come on there, that you feel proud that, you kind of like set the stage for them as well.
Yes, I know. I honestly, it's still very surreal to feel like we're part of the canon, because now I just watch it casually, and then every now and then I'm just like, oh my god, yeah, we were part of this. We did this. We influenced what happened here.
Exactly. And I do not watch it casually. We get our popcorn and we pop in front of that television. My fiance, he loves to record stuff and watch it later. I am the type, I want to watch it right in the moment, right then and there, commercials and all, and we talk through it, and I'm like, shh, shh, shh. I don't like people talking when Survivor's on. I love kind of just diving into the social aspect of the game and the psychological aspect of the game. I mean, I'm a sociology major, and so I just love the human dynamics of people in very fast-paced situations and how they've got to act on their toes. I mean, the game has definitely changed from when you were out there to when I was out there. It was much slower pace when
Yes,
I was out
definitely.
there compared to where it is now. And I'm just like, holy smoke. I mean, and I don't know, Erika, if it's as fast as it looks like on television with us nowadays, but it looks like things are going a mile a minute.
It is very fast. I think a lot of people ask me about all the downtime I had on the island, and I'm like, listen, maybe pre-merge when my tribe kept winning, we had lots of downtime and I did get bored. But once you hit the merge, it's like every day, boom, 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 challenge tribal council, no days off. It is not a slow game where you have lots of downtime. Like, it is fast.
Yeah. And then you guys had all the hidden immunity idols also. And you guys had Exile Island too, right?
Yes, I was at the time unfortunate, but in hindsight, I had the life-changing opportunity, the character-building opportunity to live on Exile Island. Well, actually, a lot of people ask me what I learned from being on Survivor. I feel like I have lessons that I learned after filming the show, but then
Yeah.
even years later, I'm still continually learning lessons because of that experience. Are you still learning lessons about your experience decades after you filmed the show?
Oh, yes. One of the biggest things that I learned from the moment I got on the island till now is don't discount the little things in life, because they can be gone at the blink of an eye. And so even coming home and realizing that I could go to my refrigerator and pull anything out of my refrigerator at any time is a huge blessing in itself. I also learned that you cannot discredit people based on their actions, because sometimes their actions can be just driven by the moment. Sometimes their action can be driven by the experience, and others can be driven by their emotions. And so you've got to take them from that moment, give them time, then put them in another environment and see if you see the same thing. And then for myself, I had to realize that I'm an imperfect being and that I will not always get it right. And it's okay. And even if you don't always get it right, that you can still come out a winner. And I think that was one of the biggest things. And I constantly influence my son through that is, despite your obstacles, every day you're still shining and you're still a winner. And if you have that mentality, then nobody can shoot you down, regardless of how things come out. And that's been really my mantra, even before Survivor.
There's so much to learn about self-compassion when it comes to this experience. Yes, of course, we overcome all these amazing things. We come out winners, but there is still the level of having to forgive yourself and be kind to yourself in this experience. A lot of people who listen to this podcast, they have had some type of experience in their life where they have felt overlooked. And I know that with you not getting called, you've had that experience. You've also faced so much adversity in your life. I feel like there's so much more that we could have been talking about, like your divorces and your battle with breast cancer. You have done so much in your life. So for people who might be battling that feeling of being overlooked, what is your advice for them? And what's something that you might say to yourself when you're going through those experiences?
So one of the things I always tell people is do a self check. You have to know your emotional intelligence and being aware of your emotion. And it is okay to say, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. And then ask yourself, in that anger, where are your levels? Is it just you're angry because you've been passed up yet again? You're angry for the moment because you're getting all these emails and texts and things from people? Or are you angry because as the first, because there are many people that are the first that they didn't find the significance in that? Or is it a combination of all of those? When you're able to actually diagnose your emotional intelligence in a situation, then you're able to deal with it a lot better. For me, every time my emotional intelligence is challenged, when a new survivor comes out and they're talking about bringing winners back. And so I self prep myself for that and know that it's coming. Where is my emotional intelligence going to be? And so I'm pre-prepping myself. I'm going to be at a 7. I know I'm going to be at a 7. I'm excited for it, but I know I'm not going to be called. So let's prepare ourselves for, my responses to people's, inquiries. So that's what I would tell people. Do an emotional intelligence check and be honest with yourself. Damn it, I'm upset yet again. Okay, now you know where you are. How are you going to deal with that?
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I know that I have said this to you when we were chatting before we recorded, but after talking to you, I 100% understand why you won the $1 million. I would have voted for you if I was out there too. So thank you so much for being you and for spending time with me today. Can you fill everybody in on what you've been up to since the show and what you're doing now?
Wow. Okay. So what have I done? Where do I start? So I did a lot of traveling. I'm an Air Force veteran. So I still do things with the mission continues here in the Bay Area where we build houses. We also, give food to the needy. So that's something I do every now and then. I'll get a call and the mission continues. So we go out and do the work and service. I am a service driven person. My number one love language is acts of service. So I'm really big on volunteering. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which is a historically Black sorority. And I'm very much involved in our local chapter here, where I'm one of the chairpersons for our arts and letters. I'm a huge fan of the theater. So we do a lot of stuff for book reading, theaters, museums, things like that. I also do a lot of work at my current job. I'm a director in a healthcare organization here, and I also oversee a lot of our DEI work here. So diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I support our CEO in a lot of that work. I can continue to go on. I'm third time's a charm, y'all. I'm getting ready to get married again for the third time. But I know that God
Woo!
is truly continues to bless my union and very happy about that. My son is getting ready to graduate from college. He was not even in existence when I went on Survivor, but he's doing wonderful, wonderful work. He is a strong man of God, strong man of faith, and he's just going to kill this world. People always ask me, would he ever want to go on Survivor? And he's like, yeah, no. But for a long time, we even thought about him and I, maybe if they would ever call us back. And maybe 10 years ago, I think about that, but not now. So those are some of the things I'm doing.
Survivor is but one of the many, many, many incredible chapters in your life. So thank you for chatting with me about it today. If people want to follow you on social media or anything, where can they do that?
Yeah, it's just at Vecepia Robinson on Instagram and Vecepia Robinson on Facebook. I don't Twitter, I don't tweet, but those are the two that they can connect and find me.
Vecepia, thank you so, so, so much for chatting today. And you will always be an icon in my eyes and to many other people's eyes as well.
Thank you so much, Erika. This was a pleasure. Thank you, fans. Love you. We'll always appreciate you. Hit me up and just, I wish you all the best. God bless you, Erika, and God bless everyone that is here listening and watching.
I feel like I don't talk about Survivor in depth on the pod a lot these days anymore. So it's so nice to be able to have a conversation like that with someone as wise as Vecepia and to really get into what the experience was like filming and years after. So thank you so much, Vecepia, for making time for me. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with myself and with the audience. Now, I love to answer a question at the end of each episode, but since I'm talking about Survivor this episode, I'll answer a question that I've been asked a few times. And the question is, do you have your torch? Big Survivor fans know that the props get auctioned off for charity at the end of each season, including the torches of the castaways. It's really common for castaways to bid on their own torches. And when our season's props went up for auction, people were asking me if I was going to bid for my torch. And I was like, no, I don't need it. I live in a condo in Toronto. There's only so much square footage. I don't really attach as much sentimental value to items. And I feel like I have so many Survivor-related trinkets from my time in the game. My headband that I wore on the show is one of my most prized possessions. So I just felt like I didn't really need to have the torch. And I'm like, it's fine. Someone else can bid on it. So it went up for auction. Someone got it. And I never really thought about it again after that, to be honest. And then in the fall, when I went to Florida for the Survivor 45 premiere, somebody had asked me about my torch. And I was telling them the same story. I was like, didn't really need it. Don't really have the space. Hope whoever owns it is happy. Then I am introduced to this fan who says to me, hey, I have your torch. And he shows me the torch. And all of a sudden, I am just overcome with emotion. My jaw is on the floor. My eyes are huge. I'm looking at it and I'm shaking. I'm seeing my initials that are etched into the torch. And I was like, oh my gosh, so many memories came rushing back to me as soon as I held this torch. So I guess I did have sentimental memories attached to the torch, but it was so cool to have that moment to see it again. And I really felt like I was brought back. Of course, I didn't try to buy it off of this fan. I am still okay with not owning it for now, but who knows? Maybe one day in the far distant future, I'll want to buy it. I don't know. Right now, I'm happy that the fan has it. And I did learn a fun fact, and it's that usually the final 3 torches are shorter than the other torches for the other castaways, because when there's the live reunion and the live finale, in order for the torches to be put on stage, they have to cut a foot or 2 off of the bottom of the torch. But since I didn't have that same live finale in Los Angeles, for a while, I think I had the tallest winner's torch. So fun fact, for a moment in time, I had the tallest winner's torch on Survivor. So that is my Survivor tidbit to share with all of you today. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast and share this episode with any other Survivor fans you know. And if you haven't already, please follow the podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. It's at Happy to See Me Pod. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.